Hello there, I'm Todd Weller. Thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn served by the FileMaker team here at Claris IT. Before we dig in, remember that you have a chance to win lunch on us if you leave a comment or ask a question during the live stream. Just make sure that we have your email address so that we can contact you. In this session, we turn our attention to Claris FileMaker's Manage Security options. Specifically, we're going to be talking about privilege sets and the many options available to control user access to records, layouts, and scripts. So we've got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so yeah, we're looking at specifically Claris FileMaker Security today, and it's broken down into two parts. The first is the accounts, which asks the question, who has access to the file. And then the second part are the privileges or the privilege sets that are set up, and those define what the user can do. And then just to be aware that this is a one or a many-to-one relationship where you can obviously have many accounts assigned to a single set of privileges, but each user can only, or each account can only have one privilege set assigned. So if a user happens to work in two different departments that needs to have ability to do different things depending on those job duties, you would either have to assign one account, one privilege set or the other, or possibly create a third privilege set in order to kind of merge those. You can't have them assigned to both. So just something to keep in mind as we're moving forward. And so with the accounts, you have options for local accounts, in the given, Claris FileMaker file that you're working in. You also have a number of options for external authentication, whether with a locally hosted, Active Directory server, or you also have, options with, now with Apple ID, Google, Amazon, Azure, as well as other custom OAuth provider for that third-party authentication. As a lot of companies are moving to single sign-on when they want to have everybody using one username and password to access all systems. So you're certainly able to do that with FileMaker as well. But where we're going to be spending the bulk of our time today is in the privilege sets, because when we think about security, typically we're thinking about, okay, which users can get access to my data. We don't really spend a whole lot of time thinking about, okay, what can they do once they do have access? And that's where we find, a lot of, data that gets changed or records that accidentally get deleted. It's not because someone's being malicious, it's just because they have privileges that maybe they shouldn't have and something accidentally happens. Well, by setting up the privilege sets here, this is what you are able to do to control all of those things. So there's a section as we get into the privilege sets here for controlling data access and design. That gets you information as far as records, the tables and fields, all of the data, layouts, which layouts they can use. Do they have the ability to modify layouts? And then also value lists and scripts the same way. Can they create them or just use them or not even use them? Okay. You can set all of those things. Then we can also get into something which is extended privileges, which we'll take a quick look at. And there's a number of default ones that are available in the FileMaker platform. And those are typically set up to control access via the different methods, whether it's via ODBC or through the web, or even just as a hosted file on server. There's an extended privilege that allows you to control that. But then you're also able to create custom privileges for these extended privileges that do have their place as you're controlling what users are able to do. And there's also a section of other privileges. The two most common ones that I use are to whether allow printing or not, and then allow exporting. But there's a number of other options which we will take a look at. And I apologize for getting my tongue tied up there for a second. So let's go ahead and we'll just go ahead and dive in. We're back in our contacts database, which if you've spent any time with us, you're used to seeing. And so that's what we're going to go ahead and use. And what I've done to help us out, because since we are working in the privilege sets and not necessarily concerned with the accounts. I've already gone ahead and created a number of accounts and then gone ahead and set up some scripts that allow me to change back and forth quickly. We also have one that will show the username so we can confirm which we are, and then we have these 4 different accounts, which the first 3 are the default privileges that FileMaker gives you, and then we're going to go ahead and create a custom one as we get into all of those different details. All right, so in order to access security, you find it here under the File Manage Security. You'll notice that there are no shortcut keys, so this is one of the few things in FileMaker that you actually have to navigate to the menu item. There's no shortcut key for it, so as we open that, it brings up the the Manage Security, and you can see there are the 4 accounts. As along with the guest account, which is automatically created by default. You've got the guest and the admin are your default accounts. But then to get to the privilege sets, we want to go ahead and use this advanced settings down here. And that brings this up where we can see the privilege sets that have been created. We've talked about the extended privileges that we'll touch on later on, as well as the file access, which is if you're using in a multi-file solution, you're authorizing which files are able to pull their data from the current file that you're working on. So, but again, today's all about the privilege sets. All right, so what does that look like? So we're just going to go ahead and actually let's go ahead and create a brand new one. All right. Now you have a couple different options depending on what you want to do. You can, as you can see, you can select an existing privilege set, which these are the 3 default ones that come with every FileMaker solution when you create it, or so you can duplicate one of those 3 that is closest to the end privileges that you need, or you can go ahead and create a new one. Now what I find myself doing most often is that typically I'm dealing with some type of data entry where I want to be able to control things a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the data entry, and then we can get in there and edit. Now data entry only copy is not very descriptive, so we're going to go ahead and change that. And we're going to start with this because this is one of the common things that we will do in a lot of our solutions, where you want to give the users as much ability as possible to create and edit to capture the information, but you don't want them to accidentally delete anything. And so that's where you can come in here and make this change. And like I said, this here is where here's our data and design, or our data access and design with records, layouts, value lists, and scripts. And as we click here are a few of the default and quick options that would cover all tables that are in your current solution, where you've got create, edit, delete in all tables, create and edit in all tables, view only in all tables, and then all no access. Okay. And then you get into custom privileges. Now obviously, because this is a rather simple file, I could just select the create and edit in all tables if I want to take away delete, but because we're going to be doing some other things and I want to kind of show that, we're going to go ahead and go select the custom privileges. And once you do that, you get into another pop-up that gives you a little bit more detail, and you can see here we've got a number of different tables that have been created in this file, and as you select, there's different options for viewing. You have yes, limited, or no is your option. But when it comes to create, you just have yes or no. Okay. Again here, the edit, you have a limited option as well as delete. Okay, so for example here, the variables, that's just a table that we throw in a lot of our solutions that just have global variables in them, so it doesn't really matter. But obviously contacts, we don't want them to be able to delete there. Probably don't want them to be able to delete from the location. All right. Same thing here for the coasters, but just because I know what this file was doing is that the experience is riding a coaster that maybe they recorded one and then it needs to be removed. But what we're able to do here is if we select this limited option, it brings up the calculation dialog for us, and so now we have the entire power of the calculation engine to determine can this user delete this particular record. Okay, one of the more common ones is if the user has created the record previously, then they should have the ability to delete that record, but not affect someone else's records. This is applies quite often when you're thinking about like a notes table where you've got a contact that your business deals with, and as everybody makes contact with individuals, they're adding, I talked to so and so about reordering this particular item on this date and time, and they said check back in a week. So you can add that note, but you want the person to be able to edit the note, maybe delete the note, but you don't want someone else to be able to do that. So that's where you can get in here and do this kind of stuff. They do have this nice little note down here that your result has to be a Boolean result, and where anything that's true, access is going to be allowed. If it evaluates as 0 or empty or false, then the access is going to be denied. So what functions do we need to do that? Well, there's this function right here, which again is a very common one. So if the account name equals the account name of the user, and again, just because of the naming convention that we use, I know that this will autofill with the account name when the record is created. So now we're able to go ahead and allow that. Okay, and so like I said, delete, you have the ability to do that. You can do the same thing with editing. Another common one here is you may want to have the ability to edit it, but only for a certain period of time. All right, so if oops. And again, a lot of this is going to key off, the creation information that is captured. All right, so this one here is going to allow us to edit the record if the record was created and we're within 7 days of that creation time. And we're able to do a very simple calculation like this because of how FileMaker stores dates. Since it stores it as a number, we can just add 7. We don't have to look at what is today's date and increment the day and still figure out the year and all that kind of stuff. FileMaker is very kind to us in that regard. So that's a very simple calculation that will add a lot of times, in the edit, even sometimes on the delete, where you say, somebody may have made a mistake, but if they don't, delete it within the first hour, then it probably is something that needs to stay in the system. So that's kind of where, you have the full palette of possibilities of what you're able to do. And of course, as we're talking here, I put it in the wrong table. So we're going to go ahead and, because I put it in the coasters instead of putting it into the experience like I had talked about. So let me quickly fix my mistake. That one. Okay, so fix my boo-boo. Now the last thing here just is to make a note of is that you also have the ability to control what a new table is going to inherit as far as privileges for that user. Okay, so if you want to make sure that any new table that you create, they don't have the ability to delete, you can go ahead and set that like this, so that if we were to create a new table, they would obviously it would automatically inherit those privileges. All right, so the other thing to note over here is this is like the kind of the record level view of security in each of those tables, but then we also have the ability over here to control field access. All right, again, you can have access to limited, all, limited, or none. So I'm going to go ahead and just select limited here. We're going to go back down to this table. And you'll notice it brings up a list of all of the fields in that table. I'm going to just click there to sort them, and you can see some of the information that's being collected in this table. And you can see here that for each field I have the ability to select whether the user can view it, if they have the ability to modify it, or if they have no access to that table. So I'm going to leave this one alone for right now, but I'm going to show you what that may look like here in just a little bit. All right, so that all looks good. That looks good. That looks good. And the only thing we need to do here is just change our other privilege set to over here to our data entry no delete, which is the one that we just created. All right, so go ahead and save that. All right, so now, again, just so you can see here, I'm going to run one of the scripts, and so now we're logged in as data, so I'm able to go in and if I were to try to delete that, it's going to ask me, I'm going to cancel that. But if I were to switch here to the other account, see, it doesn't even give me the message because here when I go into records, you can see that, okay, I do not have permission to delete the record because, again, it's been set in the privilege set. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch over to the experience. So let's go to just go back to this table that doesn't have a whole lot of stuff on it. All right, so here is the experience table, which is the one that we've created. Now this one here, the user does have the ability to delete records because, again, that's where we have the calculation, so the at least the menu option is still available. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a delete. And because we have it set up to where it has to be within a certain number of days of the creation, this one here was obviously created a number of years ago, so I do not have the ability to delete this. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new record just to get something. All right, and I'll just record. Okay. We'll give that a rating, and we'll say that today's ride was the ride date. Okay, now, like I said, this is a record that this user created. I go ahead and try to delete. It's going to prompt me, do I want to delete it? Okay, if I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my read-only user, you can see that the new record is grayed out here in the menu bar or the status area. Also, it's grayed out here under records. So again, this is a view-only privilege set that I'm using. I'm going to switch to my data one. Go ahead and create a new record. Okay. Switch back to our other user, and now if I try to delete, it's going to say, because it knows that even though it's within the time frame, I'm not the right user. And actually, I want to come in here and oops, and I'm still able to edit because the edit is tied to the date and not the user that had created. So there's a lot of granularity that doing that gives you as you set up your privileges. All right, so what else do we want to look at here? All right, so let's go ahead and go back into our manage security, which I can't do because I do not have privileges, so I got to go back to the admin user. So now I can go ahead and do that. Okay, settings, we'll go ahead and continue editing this one here. Now you see I'm able to do the same thing with layouts where you have a fewer options as far as like kind of like the canned defaults for everything, but you still do have the ability for custom privileges with just a few options here. The one is you can select whether the layout itself can be viewed or is modifiable, and then you can also set whether the records on that layout are view only or modifiable for that user. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make a change here. So I've switched it so that this may be a layout that's been created just for admins. So I want to make sure that nobody has access to it just because of the information that's on there, because it's not necessarily formatted. We're throwing all of the data on there. I'm just going to go ahead and make that change. Same thing here for value lists. Again, you have custom privileges as far as do they have the ability to view? Can they modify a given value list? Can they create new value lists? That's something that's also can be very important. Like I did miss that here under the layout privileges, as far as whether they can create new layouts. So if you've given your users ability to edit reports or create custom reports and things like that, you would be able to do that, but then still control their access to not edit data entry layouts, things of that nature. And of course then the last one here, which is again the same three options, but as we get into the scripts, you're able to say is this script executable only? Can they modify it? Do they not have access to that script? There may be a script that does a delete all records that you want to make sure that the user does not have access to that particular script. And again, the checkbox up here to allow creation of new scripts. Okay, so that handles that data access and design area. Here's where we get into the extended privileges, okay, which, like I said, that's the listing of them. I'm going to switch back to a different tab as we get into the exact details of that. But then over here, these are some of those other privileges that I was mentioning. Again, you can allow printing and exporting or disable that. You can allow the user to manage the extended privileges without having to have a full access account. You can also give the users the ability to manage accounts that don't have full access. So if you're tired of creating accounts, or saying somebody needs to be able to access to this layout or whatever, you would be able to pass that off to someone that does not have a full access account to free your time up for developing and doing those sorts of things. Are they allowed to override the data validation warnings or not? Are you going to disconnect them from the server when they're idle? How are you going to handle the password that has to be changed? Things like that. And you also have the ability down here, the available menu commands. Okay, so if we were to go ahead and change this one, just so you can see, actually let's go with the minimum just to make it very obvious here for that one. And we'll go ahead and save it. So now, like I said, I'm just going to go over to this layout and go ahead and log back in as our other user, which we still have access to this one because that's how we had set it up. We had done everything here with the layout. And you see that's no longer listed. And I've got a few fewer menu items as far as what has been grayed out there. But again, if I switch back to read only, which has again the full full menu item, so you have some ability to control what the user can do through what menu commands and menu options are available without having to set up custom menus everywhere. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to that one. Now this one here, like I said, if the user has no access to the layout and they happen to get to that layout through a script or something, you're going to see no access. Okay, so that's one option. Let's go ahead and switch back to our admin account. Go back in, do some manage security again. Get back into our advanced settings, take a look at the privilege set. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set this back to view only. But what we want to look at now here is in this custom for the field access itself, and say, for whatever reason, I don't want them to be able to see the duration. All right. So I can set that one to be view only. I don't want them to change it, but maybe length. Don't want them to have access to it at all. So I've made a couple changes there. Okay, I'm going to switch back to our other account. Make one change here. Get that out. All right, so there's our admin account, going back to our other account. And again, just like with the field or the layout, now with the field, if they do not have access to that data, they will see no access in here. On the length and the duration, all right, it says this action cannot be performed because the field is not modifiable. So again, another way to control what the user is able to do, but this time you're doing it at the layout level compared to, or the field level. So it wouldn't matter what layout you're on, that field is not modifiable for them, regardless of where they're at. All right, so that is that information. Let's go ahead and get back to our admin account. Go ahead and go over to manage security. All right, so we were talking about the extended privileges, all right, and that's what you see over here. Let me go ahead and extend that out. Well, these here are all of the extended privileges that come already in a FileMaker solution out of the box. One of the key ones is this one here, this FM app extended privilege. And as you can see, that's access via the FileMaker network, which means if the file is hosted, does this security account have the ability to log into that file? But there are other ones here. Like you said, here's one for FileMaker Web Direct. So you can create a privilege set that has access via FileMaker Web Direct, but does not have access to be accessed locally, or vice versa. Okay. Here's the one for ODBC. We'll come back to that one, but you can see there's one for XML, PHP, via the REST or the FileMaker Data API, access via OData. Okay, so those are the ones that kind of control the access, but there are other ones that control some behavioral things. The one is this FM reauthenticate, which would require reauthentication after the specified number of minutes, which is the number that you see here after the FM reauthenticate. So if 10 minutes isn't long enough, you could change that to 15 or 20, or whatever number makes sense for you there. Whether Apple events or ActiveX are able to perform actions. Okay, here's one that allows URLs to run FileMaker scripts, which is important if you're passing information back that way. And there's also one here for validating cross-file plugin access. Okay, now, like I said, those are the ones that come with FileMaker out of the box. But what is nice is that as developers, we do have the ability to create an extended privilege. Okay, and all it is that you would assign a keyword. Okay. And usually what I'll do is, since all of the FileMaker ones begin with FM, I'll usually pick like the company name or something as an abbreviation so that I know which ones are the ones that I've created. And then you're able to give it a description. Okay. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and check those. And check there. All right, and so like I said, this typically where I'll use this is that if I want like a special privilege, but it's for multiple groups, I'll create the extended privilege, assign it to those groups, and then in my script or in a calculation on the field, I can check to see whether they're a member of that group. So I'm going to go ahead and open up, actually I don't need script debugger, I'm just going to go ahead and open up the data viewer just so that we can see it. And get rid of that one, create a new one. You'll notice that there is a get function that allows us to get those extended privileges. So we'll go ahead and monitor that. Okay. Make that just a little bit smaller. Shrink this window just a tad. All right, so now if I switch to the, all right, now unfortunately I don't have to re-authenticate here. Oops. Sorry, that's the account I'm using. This is the one I need to use for the there. And you can see here that I know that, okay, this account is the FM re-authenticate as well as XIT allowed. So now I can use that information in my script to see, do they have that extended privilege? So let's go ahead and switch back and see, did I miss anything? Like I said, we didn't get into every single nuance, but hopefully it gives you, enough information to kind of understand, what you're able to do, especially as you get in here, especially like with records and layouts, being able to control access to the information that's either in the record or on the layout via security, because you can do security by obscurity where, well, I'm just not going to take the user to that layout. So that I don't have to worry if the field's not on the layout, then they can't make a change or something like that. But then you do have to worry about, well, what if something happens in one of my scripts and it leaves the user in the wrong place on a layout where they do now have access to edit that particular field? Well, if you have it set up in security, then you know for sure that nothing is going to get accidentally changed. So certainly, it adds a layer or some complexity to your programming and setup of the file, but you'll probably be able to sleep better at night because of how the security is set. All right. Well, like I said, I think that was a pretty good overview of what you're able to do as you get in there with the extended privileges and managing the different security options for fields and things. Let's see if we have any questions. Okay, well, here's a good question. Just a personal preference, like how do I handle the authentication part? Typically, the systems that we're working in are not a single file. So we've got a multi-file solution. So that is something that's definitely easier to do using some type of external authentication. Whether it is an Active Directory server that's in-house or one of those third parties. In fact, let's go ahead and switch back over, and we'll take a quick look at that. As you can see here, here's the different identity providers that you can authenticate against or your own external server. And what makes that nice is instead of having to add every single user, you're now adding groups of users based on what is set up in that external authentication. And so as people come and go and leave the company, you're able to then, instead of having to go in and remove a user or make an account deactivate it, which you are able to do here instead of deactivating an individual account. That's all handled by that external authentication. So as long as the group exists there, FileMaker is going to be able to authenticate it and then give the person the proper privileges based on the group that they belong to. And then so instead of adding 20 users to 10 different files, you're maybe adding 3 or 4 different groups. Now, obviously, if you just have a single file solution and it's smaller number of users, being able to come in here, manage the local accounts is very easy to do. In fact, sometimes it's easier to do because you don't have to worry about learning Active Directory. You can just manage it here. There are script steps that are going to allow you to be able to manage those accounts. I'll just go and discard that. Let's switch over to our script workspace. Like I said, here's one of the script steps that you're able to use to do that relogin, like I said. But if you'll notice over here, there's a number of accounts, so you can kind of set up your own scripts to be able to help you manage those accounts, as far as adding the account, changing the password, deleting it, enabling it, resetting the password, things of that nature. So you're able to script a lot of that stuff as long as you're using those local FileMaker accounts. Okay. Here's a good question. What are some of the pitfalls of being granular as it comes to things? Obviously, the biggest one is just, there's going to be more time, both in doing the setup and then also doing testing to make sure that have we limited access to the user, where it's necessary, but then can they still get to everything they need to do their job. Another gotcha, let me just show you this, because I've done this myself. And we had touched on this here, in the privileges, that you do have here in our layouts, actually layouts, value lists, and scripts. One of the things that you are allowed to do is you can allow them to create new layouts or new value lists or new scripts. But the one thing that you have to do is that for when they add it, if this is the default or if this is the default, they're able to create the new layout, create the new script, create the new value list, but then they can't edit what they just created. So just, this is something that's, bit me a couple of times, is where I've checked this box thinking, oh, this is great, the user can create their custom reports that they want, but then I didn't give them the ability to actually, any new layout to be modifiable, for them whenever they create it. So just, obviously be aware of that little gotcha right there. All right. Let's see, do we have any other questions? All right, I don't see any. Just have a few upcoming events, just like to point out. First, FMberg, which is the Pittsburgh FileMaker Developer Group. We're meeting again on the first Wednesday of March. That means our next meeting is now just 2 weeks away, and it will be on Wednesday, March 1st at 7 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting, which means you have the option to attend in person or join us remotely. For details and to RSVP, please visit www.crossit.com/fmberg for all the details. Our next Lunch and Learn takes place on Wednesday, March 15th. And so we're still in the planning stages, but you can be sure that Todd will be here and talk about something. All right. So again, we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. If you like what you saw and heard, please click the thumbs up and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, we humbly ask that you do. You can also hit the bell to get notified when we do go live. Some of the content that's presented as part of our Lunch and Learn sessions are the results of your questions. If you have a suggestion for a future topic, or if a specific FileMaker problem has you stumped, please submit those topics and questions by emailing us at nutshell@crossit.com. Your idea or question may be a featured topic of a future Lunch and Learn. Well, from all of us at CrossIT, we are glad to have served you. Have a great day.